Hey, this is Steve with Real Progressives. One of the subjects that always comes up to me when I'm talking about modern monetary theory is why don't we just cut the military and then we can pay for all these programs? And it's real easy to jump to the punchline, you know? I was talking to a friend earlier today about this, and I said, when you jump to the punchline, it's like meeting a pretty girl or a handsome guy and you're on a date and you just start stripping down into your skivvies out there in the middle of the parking lot. You're not even, you haven't even said, hi, my name's Steve. The idea here is that sometimes the most obvious answer just gets us into a kind of fight. And nobody wins, right? Nobody wins at all. So we have to kind of slow play. We have to do a little bit of debating foreplay to get ourselves to where we can explain the idea of decoupling, cutting spending from new spending. Because otherwise, you just get into these kind of talks, right? So I'm titling this subject, hey, wait a minute, what about the foreplay? So the military is the progressive stronghold for places to cut. Everybody that you talk to, when you talk about military spending, they say, hey, we could buy health care. Hey, we could get schools and student loans and all this stuff. And that's right. I mean, I guess in the sense that if you think that we are somehow or another strapped for dollars, then yes, if we cut somewhere in some theoretical false world, that would work, like in your household budget, right? If you have to cut spending at your household budget, it makes sense that you can use that money you saved over here. But that's not how the federal government works, right? But you can't just jump to that point because it blows people's minds. They're not quite ready for it. They need a kiss. They need you to hold their hand. They need you to caress their cheek and explain to them that you love them and that you're interested in what's happening in their day. Okay? So what I say is this, right? If you have a hammer, you're looking at a hammer and you say, listen, this hammer, we both like this hammer. There's nothing wrong with a hammer, correct? And they say, yeah, it's nothing wrong with a hammer at all. And you say, great, nothing wrong with a hammer. You're against murder, right? Yes, I'm absolutely against murder. I'm against murder too. And you say, did you know this hammer can be used to build a house? Or this hammer could be used to murder someone, correct? Yeah, absolutely. But you don't hate hammers, do you? Well, no, I don't hate hammers. But you hate murder, right? It's like, yeah, I hate murder. So the idea here is you slowly but surely build your case that something can be used for good or for evil. Just like deficit spending can be used for good or for evil. You get this constant pushback from people that aren't quite sure about how the economy works. That if we don't cut military spending, how can we possibly spend on healthcare? How can we possibly spend on student debt? How can we possibly spend on the environment? We have to cut the military to afford something over here. So your end goal is to decouple spending from cuts because they don't have anything to do with each other. Because every time the government spends, it's a new dollar, right? So, okay, so you cut over here. All you did in the bathtub of the economy, and I'm looking at the way my screen is, so let's say the bathtub is up here. If it overfills, you got inflation. But let's say our economy is right here, regardless of where it's spent, whether it be on the military or whether it be on student loans or whether it be on whatever, coup d'etats in Iran, I don't care. Whatever it is that we're spending money on, the economy is up to here. When you reduce spending, you shrink the economy like this, unless you are a net importer, or a net exporter, which means that we have money coming into the bathtub to raise the water up higher. But unfortunately, we are not a net exporter, are we? We're a net importing nation. So when we reduce spending at the federal level, we don't have imports or exports, to fill the bathtub up. So what do we end up using to fill the bathtub back up with? Think about it quick before the bathtub becomes a depression. Oh, that's right, we fill it with bank credit. All of a sudden, banks start sweating us out, filling the tub up with bank credit. But what happens when you run out of credit-worthy people? What happens when you run out of capacity to take on more private debt? All of a sudden now, people stop paying and defaults start happening. They can't take on more loans. The federal government stops spending. And now what happens to the economy? As money leaves the economy through buying imports and stuff like that, we have a recession. We have a depression. We have boom-bust cycles like we had during the global financial crisis. So when we're talking about reducing spending to pay for something, we have to understand that the people we're talking to most likely don't understand the economy through sectoral balances like I just described. Most people don't understand this. So we have to kind of get them to somehow or another see that just because we want to spend money on healthcare, just because we want to spend money on student debt or whatever other program we want to do, it's not dependent on us cutting spending somewhere else. That spending that we want to cut over there, it's still subject to the tub theory, the tub concept. The money in the economy starts going like this. So we have to replace that spending. And let's be fair, folks. Right now, if we cut spending, most of America is living less than paycheck to paycheck. That's the only reason you hear about private banks. And that's the only reason why you hear all the crimes about banking, because we are reduced to borrowing money to survive. So when you're talking to the people that say, we got to cut military spending in order to save money, which we don't do, that's not how it works. In order to save money to pay for these other programs, you need to come up with some analogies. You need to come up with some analogies for how that whole thing works out. Now, I will tell you quickly, this is a quick primer on sectoral balances. So there's three sectors really to the economy. There is private sector debt, there is public sector debt, and then there's what we call rest of world, or these are all balances. They could be plus, they could be delta. Bottom line is there's three: private, public, and rest of world. So if we are in deficit in the public sector, being the government is in deficit, that means there's more money in the bathtub. When the government is in surplus, that means there's less money in the bathtub. You begin to understand that if we reduce spending, we're left with two places that we can get money: private sector debt or imports or exports. You have to look. It doesn't take much to figure out. The United States has been a net importing nation for a long time, to the tune of better than $500 billion a year. We are net importers. So that $500 billion is a drain on the economy. Not in a bad way, drain being the dollars leave the economy. Those dollars have to be replenished or the economy dries up. And again, I point to the fact that that's leaving us with one thing. If you're busy reducing the deficit, which is our private savings, you're busy realizing that we are a net importer, which is reducing the money in the economy because it's leaving the country going to other goods and services. It leaves us just with private debt, and that's you and I. And when you and I can't afford our bills anymore, and businesses start going under because we can't spend money on their products anymore, the economy goes boom, we all go boom, and down the toilet we go. So we must make people understand that taxes do not fund federal spending. So when you're looking at cutting it here to spend it there, that's not how it works. That is absolutely not how it works. And you have to slow play people to that, because unfortunately they moralize. Well, we shouldn't be spending this money on the military. I agree with you. We shouldn't be fighting wars for oil. I agree with you. Oh, well then what's the problem? The problem is that the U.S. government creates its own money every time it spends money. And then they say, but what about the private Federal Reserve? The next gotcha bullshit, right? The next gotcha. This is the game that they play. What about the private Federal Reserve? Let's take just a minute and talk about the quote-unquote private Federal Reserve. First things first, there is no stock ownership in the Federal Reserve. These things are called stock. It's not like stock like any of us own when we purchase stock for a company, etc. It's not like that. It's more like buying into the system. That's it. It's a totally different word. Should be called something entirely different. Okay, they got the 6%. Everybody loses their mind. Not everybody, but there's a certain sect of the population that is wrapped up in this thing. So be it. The next part of this is Federal Reserve doesn't just randomly print money. That's not how it works. The Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates or lowers. They adjust, raise, and lower interest rates to protect a positive interest rate for lending, interbank lending. So this interest rate, that's why they talk about raising rates. And what that amounts to is largely a basic income for the wealthy. So when they raise interest rates, just basic income for bondholders. It's not a big deal because they budget that money to begin with. And where do you think the money for those bond interests come from? Taxpayer dollars? No. Keystrokes, literal keystrokes. This is how they expand the money supply. This is how they shrink the money supply. This is not a big deal. They have no real means of control for that because you've got bank loans, right? Loans, loans, loans. But what's the difference between a bank loan and the federal government spending? Federal government spending, you can net save a federal spent dollar, right? You can put that dollar in a piggy bank and never worry about it again. However, your loans, the loans you take out from the private bank, you have got to pay those back, right? Or you start getting the bill collect, that mean guy, hey, my name's so-and-so, who is this? Stay right where you're behind on your bills, blah, blah, blah. We're going to come take your car. What, so the bottom line is it's a very, very different thing, okay? You cannot net save a loan. You can net save a government spent dollar. So when the government spends on a program, it's not sitting there having to pay that back in interest because the interest payments are paid via keystrokes. It's already planned out. It's not a big deal. But the private Federal Reserve is owned by the Rothschilds. Not true. Not true at all. The United States Congress spoke the Federal Reserve into being completely. Okay, in 1913. It has changed its charter many, 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 many times over the course of that. Okay? Any rule that the Federal Reserve is governed by can be changed by an act of Congress. Period. Period. The Federal Reserve didn't come here and dictate terms to the United States government. The United States government tells the Federal Reserve what it does. Now, Congress failing to act and failing to regulate banks, that's a different story. Now, if I'm sitting there and I'm a parent and I've got a child and that child is sitting there running around hitting kids and I just let that child go around hitting kids, I'm the parent. It's my job to make sure I regulate the child's behavior. They're a child. They're going to do whatever they do. I've got to regulate their behavior. I've got to teach them. I've got to set boundaries. And I've got to enforce the boundaries I set. Congress has chosen not to do that. So we blame the banks, but the reality is it's Congress, 100% Congress. So your Congress is allowing this to happen. Why is that? Because this is the way we extract wealth from the nation through interest and through financialization of all the different transactions. Our entire economy has become a financial freaking buyback, stock buybacks, you name it. So back to the war machine for a minute. The Federal Reserve doesn't just print money to pay for the war machine. Congress has to authorize spending. So reducing the military budget or expanding the military budget is an act of Congress, not the Federal Reserve. Do you understand this? This is very important. There isn't just a random printing of money and flooding the market with cash. Cash enters into the economy when Congress tells it to spend. Cash leaves the economy when Congress authorizes a tax to be issued. So when we say we can't afford something, what do we run out of fingers to type in keystrokes? That's what it comes down to. We have the real resources to provide health care for all. We also, and this is the real sad but true truth, we also have the real resources to bomb the world 50 times over again. There is no solvency constraint for fattening up the military. I want you to understand this. So your moralizations about Trump is bankrupting the nation with the military, Obama is bankrupting the nation with the military, Bush is bankrupting the nation with the military. It's not true. It's simply not true. It sucks. It's bad. So we have to fight that war on the right terms. Because if we try to act like we're broke, which we're not, if we try to act like we're broke on the military, do you not think the propagandists will come out and talk about how broke we are when we talk about trying to take care of the needs of the people? Do you think that they will not come out and use the same sword we lived by to die by when it comes to taking care of the people? No, we must fight that war based on priorities, based on who we are as a nation, based on what we, the people as a public, want to do for the public purpose with that public money that is created every time Congress issues a bill. This is incredibly important to get. This is incredibly important to get. If you believe that in order to pay for things, we have money to pay for other things, that's not how it works. Hear me out again. Every single time we authorize spending, new money is created. Every single time new spending is created, it creates new money. Every single time the federal government authorizes taxation, every single time, it destroys money. The circuit goes like that way. There's not just random printing of money. There's not all this flow. What are you going to do? Print more money? No, we're not going to just print more money. The money is deleted. It is deleted. It's gone. Gone. When they received as tax, it goes away. It dies. It's deleted. It's gone. It served its purpose. Dollars spent into the economy, dollars taxed out of the economy. It's a circuit. Remember this over and over and over again. No matter what anyone says, that's how it works. That's how it works. So when we're talking about having Medicare for all, we're fighting the wrong battle when we tie it to any cuts whatsoever. When we tie it to any solvency constraint, we have failed the American people, we have failed each other, and we forgot the proper foreplay when discussing economics with our friends. It's extremely important that we spend. See, trickle-down economics says that we spend money at the top and that it'll suddenly trickle down through the economy, but that's not how it works. They invest that money. They do stock buybacks. They do whatever it is that they do. They hoard it. Money pools at the top. So when we talk about deficit spending, we talk about deficit spending on the 99% on the people at the bottom. If you don't understand this, if you're out, David, that's a shame, because this isn't a matter of ideology. This isn't politics. I'm talking purely how it actually works. And the reason why we don't have reparations, the reason we don't have social programs, the reason we don't have all the things we need as a society is because some people don't understand we don't have to chase rich people dollars to have nice things. We need to render the rich irrelevant. We can tax the hell out of them for a whole host of reasons, none of which have anything to do with affording how to pay for people. We could provide incredible school systems in inner cities. We could provide incredible stuff for every single person. We could end poverty forever. We could end poverty forever. But instead, well-meaning people don't pay attention. And they think they've got to chase rich people dollars to have nice things for the poor, and then we get nothing. Because when you chase rich people dollars for the poor, guess what happens? Their money is simply deleted. You've deleted their money, but you've not spent money on the people. The people themselves have received nothing. In order to spend on the people, you must understand this. Otherwise, we're never going to have a New Deal. And we're never going to be able to put an end to private banks bilking the American people. We're never going to be in a position where we can actually have nice things. And we'll never have green energy where we could actually end wars for oil. It just won't happen. And this is why it's so important that we understand how money is spent into the economy. This has got nothing to do with politics. Republicans get this. That's why they keep kicking our asses. Democrats don't get it. You see Nancy Pelosi come out with PAYGO. Her idea of how we're going to deal with this is that every program's got to be paid for with taxes. And when you understand that, this is why the article in The Intercept came out that said Nancy Pelosi has come out and said that she is going to go ahead and handcuff the entire possibilities for a New Deal with this PAYGO nonsense. It is a shame that we don't all understand this, because until we do, we're going to end up being the bad side of an otherwise good joke. We're going to be on the receiving end of beatings. We should tax the hell out of wealth for inequality's sake. We should tax the hell out of wealth to prevent them from hoarding. We should tax the hell out of wealth to prevent them from being able to buy their way into power. What we should not do is try to tie taxation to paying for programs for the people. This should be ridiculously clear by now. If somebody was emotionally wed to jumping to the punchline instead of using an empirical approach to tracing the dollars through the system, to understanding the way the balance sheet works, if you didn't understand this and you jumped to an emotional answer, you failed yourself in this process. You didn't fail me. I mean, you probably failed me in the end because we won't have nice things. But you failed yourself. You failed your family, jumping to the punchline. You've got to kiss the earlobe. You got to caress the cheek. You got to talk sweet nothings, and you got to ask how their day was. Okay? You've got to get through this process because it's not a simple thing. No, taxes do not fund spending. But most people don't understand why that matters. But now you do. You can't say you weren't informed now. You might have to take a few minutes to think this through until it sinks in. But it's very vital to understanding how our system works so that you can be effective in dreaming a better dream, in solving inequality, in solving the pending environmental crisis that's coming up on us. It's going to take a bold World War II level mobilization to stave off the catastrophic effects of man-made fossil fuel driven climate change. It's going to take a mobilization, and it's going to require all of us. But I'm not talking about just sacrifice and all that stuff. I'm talking about technology investments that can clean and do whatever it is to alter the environment fundamentally, to cleanse the carbon, to change the carbon footprint. We're going to need to do something radical. And the only way to do that is to understand how to marshal resources. And that is exactly what macroeconomics is about. Macroeconomics is about the efficient distribution of real resources. And right now, things are anything but efficient, and things are anything but equal. In fact, you could say we're at a moral crisis right now. In fact, you could say we're at an operational crisis right now. Look at California. California is a direct result of austerity and climate change and other factors. We must embrace this catwalk, this dance, so that we can train people, so we can get them to understand. We need everybody to take these baby steps through this process to understand. So let's recap real quickly before I close out. Number one, federal taxes literally do not fund programs. They're deleted. Number two, the Federal Reserve doesn't just randomly print more money. Money comes into existence when Congress spends it into existence. Money is deleted from the economy when Congress authorizes it to be taxed out of existence. Every dollar spent is a new dollar. Every tax is the destruction of a dollar. When we look at the bathtub of the economy, we have three key inputs. We have private debt, we have public debt, and we have rest of world. When you are a net importing nation, you can't worry about exports saving you. So you've only got two means of filling the bathtub. One is public deficits and the other one is private debt. When the American people are strapped with $1.5 trillion in student debt, that leaves us with one thing, a big old fuck you. And I'm telling you, while we're talking about cutting deficits and reducing spending and so forth, the only thing left is a giant fuck you to the American people. And this, my friends, is why we're sending army down to the Mexican border instead of fighting forest fires. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. I really hope you learned something today. Every once in a while, I try and change up how I say these messages because I'm hoping I find the right combination to help wake somebody up. If you found this to be helpful, please let me know. If you think I said something confusing, please let me know. I want to get this better and better and more betterer. Okay? I really, really want to see people taking an active interest in learning this stuff so that they can be an effective activist to teach other people. This is so vital. I think you see why it's vital. I think you understand. I know you can do it. I have confidence in you. I believe in you. Keep moving forward. You can do this. I'm out. Have a great day, everybody.